Hello, and welcome to Historical Fiction with Kviatoslav. This video will be a little bit different from some previous ones that I've done on books, because one of the purposes of my channel was I really wanted to bring and draw some attention to historical fiction written mostly in the 20th century, because I've noticed that when I watch other reviewers on YouTube and so on, they tend to focus on historical fiction written within the last 20, 30 years. That seems to be what's popular there. And I've noticed that there's not much attention given to what came in the 20th century there. This could be for any number of reasons, but I'd like to kind of mention my reasons and why I feel that that the 20th century was really a kind of golden age for historical fiction. It was when we received really, I think, the best historical fiction. That isn't to say that some good historical fiction is written today, but I think there was a much better selection of historical fiction from the previous century. And I tend to do almost all of my reading in these days on books that were written in the past. Now, this is for a number of reasons. I feel like one thing I would say a small kind of criticism, I would say, of modern historical fiction is that it tends to feel too contemporary. It seems like a lot of writers are not really able to take themselves out of the historical setting. I mean, one of the main purposes of reading historical fiction is to kind of transport yourself back to a different age and different people, different styles. Everything should be different from the contemporary world. And I've noticed that a lot of modern historical fiction tends to put basically characters from, say, the 21st century, and just transplants them to the ancient world, at least with their opinions and attitudes there. Whereas I think writers in the past, maybe it was just they were more connected to the past in some ways. They were much more able to transplant themselves and not put as much of themselves into the characters, or as much contemporary feelings into the characters there. Again, that's, obviously that's speaking in generalities, and there are a number of writers these days who are able to do that, but they're fewer and further between than I think writers in the past. So that's probably the main reason that I feel that 20th century fiction is much better. I do get a much better sense of the past. It seems that, I guess it's something about using, for example, the language that many modern historical fiction writers tend to use more modernized terms. And it can sometimes feel like the characters are speaking in, say, contemporary English, whereas in the older fiction, there was at least an attempt to make the dialogue sound a bit more authentic. Now, obviously, that's subjective, because especially when we're reading about people who would be speaking in different languages and so on, there's no real way you could get authentic dialogue. But it is something that really adds to the mystique, when you're reading something and you say, yes, this is not the way that people would speak today. And I think that really adds to the overall feeling. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of use that to explain. And again, this is not an attack on, I would say, contemporary historical fiction. I just think that's basically covered. A lot of people talk about that, and for me anyway, I feel that there's a lot of great fiction from the past century that is overlooked these days. And one of the purposes of my channel is to try to draw attention to that. So thanks for your attention. Goodbye.